So let's talk about waders and the care of waders. Waders aren't particularly difficult to take care of. The biggest thing is, to me, is making sure the inside of my waders don't get all stinky. That's the toughest part. When I get done fishing, I don't dry the outside first. I take my waders, if they're waders without built-in boots, and I reach way down inside and I grab the toe all the way down in here and I pull it inside out and I just pull these babies out of here and turn the whole wader inside out. So the inside is going to be dried first. And just keep working until you get the whole booty out and the whole deal. So now you've got this wader inside out and you wait till it dries. Then you reach back in and you pull it back out after it dries really good and you dry the outside. And when you dry the outside, you usually have on newer waders, on more modern waders, most of them, the middle quality up to the high quality waders have gravel guards. Pull up that gravel guard and let this under here dry. And once it's dried, then you can roll it back down again and dry the outside. But this is, if this is left down here with this gravel, or up, either way, and there's water inside of here, that's going to cause mildew on your waders. And if you pack them with other clothes, you can get mildew inside your whole suitcase if it's in a suitcase for a week or something in warmer weather. So I try to make sure everything I have is super dry before I put it away. If you want to, like these waders have been used quite a bit over the summer, and the pants are getting a little bit dirty, and if I wanted to, I could take warm water and soap and clean these off. But nobody hardly notices it where I'm fishing. If you were fishing with the Queen of England, you might want to clean it off a little bit. But for the most part, that's the biggest thing with waders. Also, I always carry, not that it's something to do with wader maintenance, but I carry one of those UV wader repair tubes. Boy, I'll tell you, they are absolutely unbelievable. You can, instead of the old way of patching with a patch, you take a little wader repair tube with you, and a UV tube, and a little UV light if you have to, especially when you're cloudy. I was in Alaska when the sun was never out, and when it was out, it was so low down in the horizon that the UV glue took forever and ever and ever to dry. So bring yourself a little bitty, one of those little bitty tiny pin lights with a UV light on it, and you can take care of your waders that way. Any kind of little pinholes, pricks with a barbed wire, a bush in it, that kind of stuff. Other than a huge long scratch, tear in them, it's going to work. One other thing, I've noticed some people, boy, they have somebody just yanking on these waders to pull them off. And I see, in my view, the most common place the wader leaks is where this cuff is hooked on to the booty. That's the most common place. And I really think that people who are yanking on these things all the time are the ones who get the most leaks in their waders, because this is going to be the most delicate place. So I wear a pair of socks that they slide off pretty easy, and I always bend my foot so they slide off. And I try not to just yard arm them off. Try to work them down a little bit at a time, and then take them off, instead of just pulling on this end and just pulling as hard as you can and see if they're going to come off. To me, that's just asking for trouble. So any of those little things are going to help you make your waders last longer. So I know the one other thing I do that maybe, and this is in the old days, and again, it might not even be true anymore, but I roll my waders when I store them instead of folding them. And by rolling them, I haven't created, especially when I store them over a long period of time. When you fold them, you create a crease. When you roll them, there's less of a crease. So oftentimes where you get the leak is in the crease. So, and again, I'm not sure that's true with modern day waders. It may not be true, but I just got in the habit of rolling my waders instead of folding them. Even if you don't have time, let's get back to the drying the wader part. If you've got waders with built-in boots, which I do have a couple of those pairs of waders with built-in boots for my winter fishing, I hang them up and try to put something in the top to keep the top open so that they can at least evaporate out of the top. And if I'm fishing multiple days in a row, I still try to hang them up with the top open, so at least some of that perspiration from my feet and so on gets to evaporate. So try to hang your waders in the process of drying, especially waders with boots, built-in boots. Those waders, you can't obviously turn those inside out. So you're pretty much at the mercy of evaporation through the whole thing. And of course, if you can get them in the heat, in the sun, the heat will heat up that booty, and that alone will cause evaporation, which will shoot all your moisture out. So I really don't have any trouble even with my booted waders, but that's something to consider when you're working with booted waders. Get them in the sun, open up the top and let that boot get super hot and come up, and that will cause evaporation, and then of course evaporation is going to rise and come out of the top of the wader. It's going to keep you from getting all stinky waders. Let's talk about boots and the maintenance of boots. You know, in the old days, boots were pretty susceptible to rot if you let them stay wet and of course and damp. And they're not quite as susceptible to that sort of thing as they used to be, but the stitching, if you let it sit, the stitching would rot if you didn't dry them really good. So I'm just kind of in a habit of taking care of my boots the same way I did in the old days when that was an issue. When I get done fishing, first thing I do is rinse them really good. Get everything off of them, all the crust, the algae, the sand, the mud, whatever. The second thing I do is I pull out, I wear an insert in mine, so I pull my insert out so I can dry it and I wash it really good. Then I take a garden hose and I squirt it inside and try to get the whole bottom of the inside cleaned out. Then I clean out the bottom. Then I set this boot like this so that it's going to drain. And I leave that for about a day just to let it drain if I can. And then of course, once it drains pretty good, then I'll set it upright and try to again put it in the sun. If I can put it in the sun, the heat on these dark boots, and most of our wading boots are pretty dark, if you put it in the sun, just the heat alone is going to evaporate the water inside, which is going to be coming out of at the top of the boot. So that's kind of really, boot maintenance is pretty simple. I wouldn't take too much effort into it. It's just, again, make sure they're super dry before you pack them someplace, because if you pack them wet, whatever's around them or even them themselves are going to get all mildewy, and your shoelaces will do the same thing. Will happen to your shoelaces. So dry everything really good, and if you're in salt water, I even wear these boots in salt water some, and they've got a metal, a little I don't know what you call these little doohickeys up here, but little clasp to tie it around your ankle. And I've worn these in salt water a bunch, and there's no rust on them because I rinse them really good when I get done with salt water. So that's what I do with boots. Not a whole big thing, just store in a cool, dry place. Try not to keep them wet when you're packing them, and you're in business. It should last for a long time.